Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 214 of Humanity Rising. I hope you all had a lovely weekend. Over the last few days, as you all know, Passover has commenced, and Palm Sunday in the Christian tradition. We're now in Holy Week. In India, there was another major holiday celebrating the rites of spring in the Hindu tradition. It's a sacred time as we now move beyond the equinox and we all experience the rising of spring, the rising of sunlight. Although in the south, in the southern hemisphere, we have commenced the fall and the rising of the darkness as the world spins 1,000 miles an hour on its axis, and it hurtles 67,000 miles an hour through space around the sun, which is spinning itself around the Milky Way at over 500,000 miles an hour. As we gather today, let us start, as we always do, with a moment of quiet. Let us center ourselves in our bodies. We are our bodies. Let us breathe deeply a few times. Let us close our eyes. And let us center our attention on our hearts. Let us listen to the sound of our heartbeat in a spirit of thanksgiving and immense gratitude that our hearts are beating, that we're alive. We're all alive, everyone, at this extraordinary moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart and a heart filled with gratitude and love for each and every one of you joining our session today, I would like to commence our program by hoping that each and every one of you are sitting comfortably in your homes or in your office, but somewhere where you feel secure, where you have all the benefits of home and family. Because today we're going to contemplate what it's like being homeless, what it's like being destitute. According to the United Nations, there are over 150 million human beings right now around the world that are homeless. About 50% of those are children Can you imagine having children and no home to raise them in? Habitat for Humanity estimates that there are 1.6 billion people that are without adequate shelter. We've seen pictures of the slums of Rio de Janeiro, of Mumbai, other cities around Asia, Africa, New York, LA, where people don't have adequate shelter. The city in the world that has the worst homeless problem is actually the city of Manila, followed by Los Angeles, Mumbai, and Moscow. So it doesn't matter which region of the world you're in. You can be in the wealthiest state in the Union, in the United States, in Los Angeles, and have an acute homeless problem. And basically it boils down to the public not caring enough, the state not doing enough to build the kind of infrastructure that's necessary for those who are indigent, for those who have mental illness, for those who have chronic diseases and can't afford to pay the hospital costs. The country who's actually done the most for the homeless and has almost completely eradicated homelessness is Finland, with the other Scandinavian countries close behind. So today we want to contemplate homelessness, but we want to do it within the context of how we take care of them, how we spread smiles on our streets among those who are acutely in need. And for this, we are very pleased and privileged to have Nadia Mejjati Perez with us today, who convened this panel. She's been a supporter of Humanity Rising from the very beginning, and Nadia and I got acquainted along the way, and she told me about her passion for this. So we decided we were going to do a Humanity Rising panel on the question of homelessness and profiling a number of groups that are doing wonderful work that we all need to know about in dealing with those who are indigent, homeless, and acutely in need during this quite extraordinary time. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I'd like to turn it now over to Nadia. Nadia, welcome.
Hi, Jim. Hi, everybody. My name's Nadia. I'm in France. And I just wanted to say thank you very much to Humanity Rising for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Richard, thanks to Matt, and to Jim. The reason why I decided to do this, to write to Humanity Rising and to bring these group of people together, is because when I first came across these projects, I was really, really inspired. I walked about all day with a smile, you know, and I think the reason for that is because these projects are very compassionate projects. As we know, compassion is something that's really important nowadays. It's in all of our spiritual traditions. The neurological science demonstrates the benefits. Heart coherence science as well talks about the benefits of being compassionate. And what I really love about these projects is that these are just normal people, and they've had a good idea, and they've had the courage to move on with this good idea and to face all the challenges that involves. So the other thing I really like about these is that people can get involved. If you live in these countries, you can get involved in these projects. Maybe you can even start this kind of project in your own country. So now I'm just going to introduce the panelists to you, and after that I'll pass to the first panelist so they can tell you directly about their project. So first we're going to have Katie Stagliano, who's from Katie's Crops in the United States. Then we're going to have Dunia Mebtoul. She's in Paris and with the Solidarity Fridges or Les Frigos Solidaires. After that, we're going to have Norman McGilvery from Beddown. He couldn't be with us today because he's launching his project Beddown in Brisbane as we speak. After them, hopefully we'll have Lucas Marchesi and Nick Patchett from Orange Sky Laundry. So without further ado, we'll move to Katie. Welcome, Katie. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here today. So as Nadia said, my name is Katie Stagliano, and I am the founder and chief executive gardener of a not-for-profit organization called Katie's Crops, which I started when I was 9 years old here in the United States. I live in South Carolina. And I'm going to tell you the story about how when I was in the 3rd grade, a tiny cabbage seedling changed my life forever and led me down a path of service. So when I was in the 3rd grade, I brought home a tiny cabbage seedling as a part of a school project. And the seedling was about this big. I planted it in my backyard. Every day I would come home from school, I would water and weed around it. And I even built a cage around it because my neighbor told me that there were deer eating his shrubs, and I was very worried that they were going to touch my cabbage. So I constructed a cabbage cage, which was wooden posts with chicken wire wrapped around it. And it did the trick and protected my cabbage. And that tiny cabbage seedling grew to be a 40-pound cabbage. I was absolutely astonished. I did not know that a cabbage could grow to be that big. And I was wondering what does one do with a cabbage this big? I was only 9 years old at the time, and I knew that that cabbage was far too much for my family and I. And every night before I sat down to dinner, my dad would always tell us just how blessed we were to sit down to a healthy meal, and how there were some families who weren't as fortunate as us, who went to bed hungry or relied on soup kitchens for what might be their only meal of the day. And that's when I got the idea that quite literally changed my life forever. I decided I wanted to donate my cabbage to a soup kitchen to help feed those in need. So one Wednesday morning in May of 2008, my family and I harvested my cabbage and brought it to a local soup kitchen. And when I got to the soup kitchen, I was just shocked. At 9 years old, I really wasn't aware of how big of an issue hunger was and how it affected so many people in my community and communities all across the world. And when I pulled up to the soup kitchen, there were hundreds of people in line. There were children just like my brother and I, and families just like my family who were waiting for meals. And everyone at the soup kitchen was amazing. I brought my cabbage in, and then I was blessed to come back and serve my cabbage to 275 guests of the soup kitchen. And that one day changed my life because I thought if one cabbage can feed 275 people, then imagine how many people an entire garden could feed. And that is what inspired me to start my not-for-profit organization, Katie's Crops. The mission of Katie's Crops is to empower youth to start and maintain vegetable gardens and donate the produce to feed those in need, as well as assist and inspire others to do the same. So after my ginormous cabbage and getting to see all of the people at the soup kitchen and being blessed enough to serve them my cabbage, I decided that I wanted to do more. So I talked to my parents and I said, I want to start a garden in our backyard, and I want to donate all of the produce to those who rely on soup kitchens. So I started a small garden in my backyard, and then I approached my school, and I was in the 4th grade at this time. And I told my school about my cabbage and about how I wanted to grow more produce to donate to the soup kitchen. When I was at the soup kitchen, Miss Sue, who is the director, shared with me how rare donations of fresh produce were to soup kitchens and how they mostly got packaged and processed foods. but it's so important for people to maintain a well-balanced diet, especially younger children, and get the proper nutrients that fruits and vegetables have. So I knew that this was something that I really needed to help improve upon. So my school, when I was in the 4th grade, gave me a plot of land the size of a football field and said, Katie, this is your garden. You can do whatever you would like with it. So I begun planting at my school. I got all of the students involved, my fellow classmates, and then the local soup kitchen in my community that was also a homeless shelter had to shut their doors due to lack of funding. And this was something that was so heartbreaking to me because it is the place that we had been donating the produce that we've been growing at my house, at my school, and at other gardens that we had started in my community. And I was really worried about where all of the individuals that had been receiving meals from the soup kitchen were going to go because this was the only soup kitchen in my area. And then I thought, I have all of these beautiful gardens with fresh produce growing in them. I have my friends that can come together and help me. And that is how the Katie's Crops dinners were born. I decided that I was going to take the produce from the gardens, whatever I couldn't grow, I would purchase. And we came together, my friends and I, and prepared these meals for anyone in need in the community. So that was over 10 years ago that we started the Katie's Crops dinners. And these dinners would be almost like a social event for the people that came, which was incredible. They would be friends with one another. Everyone would come in. We'd have about 150 to 250 individuals that would come, sit down, receive a healthy, fresh, and free meal. We did these once a month. And I really got to know the people that I was helping through my work with Katie's Crops. They became like a second family to me. These individuals were just amazing people that had fallen down on hard times. There were individuals that were struggling between paying their medical bills and putting food on the table. Or there were great grandparents that were caring for their great grandchildren and they weren't in good enough health to be working. There are people that had lost their jobs. Their homes had burned down. There was just so many different circumstances that caused people to fall down on hard times and wonder where their next meal may have come from. And now we have been doing these Katie's Crops dinners for over 10 years. And as I mentioned, I had the garden in my backyard and the garden at my school. And then youth from across the United States began reaching out and they wanted to also start gardens in their community. They shared how passionate they were about ending hunger, like I was, and how they wanted to do something to help their community. So we began offering the funding to youth across the United States between the ages of 7 and 16 for them to start gardens in their communities and be able to donate the produce to those in need so that they could help those struggling with hunger and food insecurity in their towns. And that has been going on also for over 10 years now. And we have started over 175 Katie's Crops gardens across the United States. And these gardens, as I said, are all run by kids. All of the produce from these gardens goes directly to those in need. And in the 12 years that Katie's Crops has been around, we have donated over 450,000 pounds of produce to those in need across the United States, served over 35,000 meals to those in need. All of those meals are hot, healthy, fresh, and free. And when COVID hit, we were no longer able to do our Katie's Crops dinners in the sense where we had 150 to 250 people gathered in a room together receiving the meals, and to keep everybody safe, that was no longer an option. So we switched over to doing weekly meal distributions, and these were drive-up meal distributions where we utilized the parking lot and the space where we had previously been serving in the dining hall. And we had cars drive up and they would receive meals via their car windows. So we would do this once a week, and we would take the vegetables from the gardens, whatever we couldn't grow, we would purchase. We would prepare the meals, box them up into go boxes, and pass them through car windows. And we made about 500 meals per week because we saw that with COVID and the pandemic, there was just so many more individuals who were really struggling with hunger and food insecurity. So many more people had been laid off of their jobs. There were kids who had previously been relying on free and reduced price breakfasts and lunches at their schools, and now their schools were no longer in person, so they were no longer receiving those meals. There was just an increase of people who had never had to worry about where their next meal was coming from, who were sitting for hours in line to receive a meal. I remember in March of 2020 when we switched over to doing the meal distributions as opposed to doing the sit down dinners, we had people that would line up at least 3 hours before we were supposed to distribute to make sure that they would be able to get a meal, just because of how much they were struggling and how they wanted to make sure that they would have something to feed their families. And there were also amazing people that would come through and pick up for their neighbors who where they didn't have transportation to get out and to get these meals, or they had an autoimmune disease or something that prevented them from going out in public for their own safety. And we had amazing people that would sit through the line and gather their meals for them. So that is something that I am extremely proud of. And in 2020, we were doing 500 meals per week, and we served over 18,000 meals to those in need in the community. And this year, we are doing the meal distributions every other week, and we continue to serve 550 plus meals. So that's just a little bit about what I do. There's lots of other exciting parts about Katie's Crops that I would love for y'all to check out. All of the information is on our website, which is katiescrops.com, Katie with a K and Crops with a K. If you happen to be in the United States, I'm in South Carolina. If you happen to be in South Carolina, we would absolutely love to have you come out to our gardens and volunteer. We always welcome volunteers. There's lots of work to be done. And if you are not in South Carolina or in the United States and you would like to help, we can always use donations to help with our meal distributions and support for our gardens as well. We just welcomed 75 new youth growers across the United States that are going to be growing with us this year. So we have lots of exciting things going on, and we are really just hoping to continue to be able to support those in need and those struggling with hunger, food insecurity, and homelessness. Those people have become very near and dear to my heart. And the thing that I have learned the most through my work with Katie's Crops is really that you never know what someone's going through until you step into their shoes. And there's so many amazing people out there who have really fallen down on their luck, fallen down on hard times, and just need a helping hand. And it's so important to just be kind to your neighbors. If you happen to have any extra produce growing in your garden, any extra food, and you're wondering what to do with it, definitely donate it to a food pantry, to a local soup kitchen, a homeless shelter, because there are a lot of people right now that are struggling with hunger, food insecurity, and especially because of this pandemic. So that's just a little bit about what I do at Katie's Crops. Thank you so much for having me on the Humanity Rising Summit. I am so honored to be here.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. So now we can pass to Nadia Mejjati. Dunia, tu es là?
Oui, je suis là, Nadia. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Hi, everyone.
Vous avez tu peux allumer le vidéo là?
Ah oui, je peux allumer ma vidéo, bien sûr. Je ne voulais pas trop longtemps. Alors, attends. Voilà.
Super, merci.
Avec plaisir. Bonjour.
Alors, on y va? Tu vas nous
On y
dire
va.
ton projet. Merci.
Alors, tu commences, Nadia?
Oui, si tu peux me dire juste tout sur ton projet, où tu as eu l'idée, et
Oui.
avec des courtes phrases, comme ça, je te traduis.
Très bien. Les Frigos Solidaires est une association créée en juin 2017.
So Solidarity Fridges is an association that was created in June of 2017.
Elle permet à des restaurants, commerçants, associations d'accueillir un frigo face à leur devanture.
So it allows people who've got a shop or a restaurant or an organization to put a fridge at the front door.
Chaque personne peut déposer des denrées.
So anybody can put food in the fridge, anybody who's got leftovers, people from outside or people who work in the restaurant.
Et ça permet à des personnes dans le besoin de se nourrir facilement et gratuitement.
So it allows anybody who is in need to be able to eat and to be able to help themselves to food easily and free.
Cette initiative permet de créer une communauté et de fédérer une économie locale.
So this project allows a community to be formed and to have a local economy.
Non, plus d'entraide locale, pardon, et moins de gaspillage alimentaire.
Yeah, she says it's less food waste and moins de gaspillage alimentaire et plus de communauté.
Et plus d'entraide locale.
Entraide locale. So there's more exchange, more local exchange, because when people come to get the food out of the fridge, they're not just getting the food, they're also chatting. You know, they're creating community.
Aujourd'hui, il existe près de 70 frigos solidaires en France.
So now in France, there's 70 fridges all across France.
Et permet d'aider des étudiants, des familles nombreuses, des retraités, des migrants réfugiés, et enfin toutes les personnes qui rentrent dans la précarité ou qui vivent dans la précarité.
Okay, so the people that she's saying are in need are, there's immigrants and refugees, there's students, there's old people, there's families, anybody who is in need, basically.
Depuis le deuxième confinement, la fréquentation a doublé, voire triplé pour les frigos qui sont restés en activité.
So she says, il y avait des frigos qui sont fermés.
Pour les restaurants qui ne font pas de vente à emporter, par exemple, les restaurants sont restés fermés, mais pour ceux qui sont restés ouverts après le deuxième confinement, on a vu une augmentation de la fréquentation des bénéficiaires.
Okay, so some of the restaurants had to be closed because of COVID, but the restaurants that stayed open, there's been a doubling, even a tripling of people that needed to come to get food who were in precarity. Et comme tu m'as dit l'autre jour, il y a plus de gens qui ramènent de nourriture aussi.
Voilà, et les dons ont également augmenté grâce aux habitants qui se sentent un peu concernés et qui ont envie d'aider ces personnes à travers une action simple et donc de mettre de la nourriture dans les frigos.
Okay, so she's saying that the people that bring food has also risen a great deal, même doublé, even doubled. They feel concerned, they feel like they want to actually help. So people who live nearby are bringing food to these fridges to help the whole community.
Voilà.
Ok, et tu as vu des autres échanges par rapport à, pas que de la nourriture, des autres choses qui, les gens ils parlent entre eux, ils font des autres échanges.
Il y a du lien social qui se crée à travers cette initiative, c'est évident, bien sûr. Ouais.
Yeah, she says that it's having a social impact as well because people are meeting each other, they're being able to help each other. D'où est-ce que tu as eu cette idée au début?
J'ai vécu à Londres pendant 1 an et j'ai eu l'occasion de découvrir un frigo solidaire, mais qui était en extérieur, à la portée de tous, et donc tout le monde pouvait récupérer et déposer.
So she lived in London for a year, and that's where she got the idea. She saw that there was a fridge outside a shop or a restaurant, and she saw that this food was shared, and she wanted to replicate the idea when she went back to France, and it's just spread across all of France. Yeah.
Dans le restaurant, oui.
Oui, oui, oui. Et du coup, qu'est-ce que vous avez besoin pour l'instant? Qu'est-ce que tu as besoin au niveau d'aide des gens?
Alors aujourd'hui, tout le monde peut contribuer au frigo solidaire. Donc un geste simple, c'est déposer de la nourriture dans le frigo que vous avez près de chez vous. Si vous voulez vous engager un peu plus, vous pouvez démarcher des commerçants.
Okay, so she says that anybody can get involved in this. If you live in France, you can, if you live near where there is a fridge already, you can put food in it. And she says that you can also get involved if you want to actually have a fridge in your restaurant. And I think at the moment they're actually looking for people who've got restaurants, who've got shops, who've got organizations. Yeah, where they'd be willing to put a fridge. Et les frigos, c'est eux qui devraient avoir le frigo, ou des fois vous avez des frigos à leur donner, ou il y a des gens qui donnent des frigos?
Non, en fait, nous, on passe par des partenaires, on achète le frigo qui est dans un meuble en bois qu'on fait fabriquer par un menuisier. En fait, on gère toute la partie structure. Le commerçant accueille juste le frigo, c'est nous qui lui envoyons directement déjà prêts dans un petit meuble en bois. Enfin, il y a des photos qu'on a pu voir ensemble.
Okay, she says that the organization actually gives the fridges. They've got these fridges from donations, and the fridge is in a little, it's in a, c'est dans une cadre, c'est ça?
Dans un meuble en bois, en fait, si tu veux, on demande le frigo, la structure en elle-même coûte 1300 euros. Donc, c'est financé soit par du financement participatif, soit par des subventions de mairie, soit par le commerçant lui-même ou par du mécénat.
Okay, so these fridges they're in a sort of wooden structure, like a piece of furniture, and they're donated by either organizations or by the people who want to have the fridge themselves. So the part of actually having the fridge, getting the fridge, that's actually done by les frigos solidaires. Super, merci, thank you so much.
Merci Nadia, merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Okay, so now we can move to Norman from Beddown in Australia. As I said, he's launching his project in Brisbane today, this whole month, in fact. So we've got a little video of him of 16 minutes. Thank you. Richard, could you put that on for me, please? Thanks. Here we are. So hi, Norman. Really pleased to have you here. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Nadia and Humanity Rising. I'm super excited to be with you.
Yeah, so please just tell us all about Beddown. What's your project and where did you get the idea?
Yeah, so thanks, Nadia. So the whole sort of motivation, and maybe start with the motivation behind Beddown, and maybe then that'll lead in nicely in terms of how it all came about. For those watching this, hello, first of all. The main motivation behind starting Beddown really stems back to my childhood, and very quickly for those watching, you probably gather from my accent, although I'm over in Australia now, that I'm originally from the UK, a place called Coventry in central England. And going back in time, I was a very young fella, mum and dad happily married. My dad had a business, shop fitting business. He was a carpenter by trade. And in his early 30s, he suffered a stroke, which left him heavily disabled. His face dropped, that impeded his speech. That was the end of the business pretty much overnight. My mum was a bit younger than my father, and she was bringing up a small child, which was myself. Now my dad was heavily disabled. That put a lot of stress and strain on the relationship. They separated and got divorced, and my dad found himself homeless, sleeping rough on the streets of London. And to cut a very long story short, because I know we've only got a limited time, at the age of 42, my dad suffered a heart attack, which ended his life, and he died lonely and homeless on the streets of London. I was 11 years old at the time and helpless and powerless to do anything about it. So here we are, nearly 40 years into the future, and a couple of years ago, I was made redundant from a not-for-profit organisation. And the first thing you do when you're made redundant is apply for lots of jobs. I applied for lots of jobs and started getting the Dear John letters or Dear Norms coming through, and some people wouldn't come back to me at all. And I started to think, well, Norm, you've nearly spent 8 years in a senior role at a not-for-profit. Maybe it's time for you to start your own not-for-profit charitable organisation. So homelessness was close to my heart with, the connection with my dad and what he went through. And I started doing the research here in Australia, and homelessness, and this is obviously before the pandemic, homelessness was getting worse. It wasn't getting any better. And for your viewers watching from all over the world, in terms of some statistics here in Australia, there's over 8,000 people sleeping rough across Australia every night on concrete, in parks, on benches, under bridges. But what really sort of snapped my attention was that of those thousands of people that are sleeping rough every night, hundreds of people lose their life every year as a result of sleeping rough. And that's everything from being attacked, overdoses, suicides, infected wounds, pneumonia, that sort of thing. And what that means is the average life expectancy of someone long-term sleeping rough here in Australia, even in 2021 now, is just 47 years of age. And I looked at that and I thought, well, my dad died at the age of 42, nearly 40 years ago. And, we don't have to look at all the technological advancements from that time to now. You only have to look at the last 5 or 10 years to see the sort of technological advancements and the medical advancements. yet that needle hadn't moved very much. So for me, that was unacceptable, and I wanted to do something about it. So the next thing was, well, what am I going to do about it? So after thinking about the issue over a few days and writing lots of ideas on post-it notes and sticking them on the wall, nothing was really resonating and connecting for me. And what I found, and what I did find, is if you're looking at trying to find a solution and you're not getting anywhere, it's good to take yourself out of the boiling pot and try and clear the mind for some inspiration. Whether it be reading, meditation, playing video games, watching TV, whatever it is. For me, this particular day, I thought I'm just going to take myself out and go and grab a coffee, go and do some retail shopping, some retail therapy. I took myself off to a local shopping mall here in Australia. And honestly, I don't know, I'm not a religious person, but I don't know if my dad was looking down on me this particular day, or the planets just aligned, because I got to this car park and I opened the car door, and that's where the light bulb moment occurred for what would become Bed Down, because the car park was virtually empty. So I got out of the car and I was looking around this structure and thinking, wow, it's sheltered, it's clean. I wonder if anyone's doing anything to help the homeless in car parks. Mm-hmm. So to cut a long story short, no one was, thankfully. So started to investigate who the major car park operators are here in Australia. Secure Parking are the largest car park operator here in Australia. They operate over 600 car parks across Australia and New Zealand. I connected with the CEO, and again, to cut a long story short there, because of limited time, over a couple of emails, he bought into the whole concept of Bed Down, and they were on board pretty quickly. Now, this all occurred in sort of November 2018, so just over 2 years ago. And once Secure Parking came on board, I thought, great, this is it. We can start welcoming guests in to use our service. And for everyone watching, we refer to people that use our service as guests because we want to welcome people in as if they're part of the family or family friend. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that was a bit naive at the time, because there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy to go through to take a space such as a car park, which may be busy during the day but left empty and vacant at night time, and changing its use into temporary overnight accommodation to get people off the streets, to offer safety, security, shelter, services, and a great place to get a good night's sleep. Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy to go through, both planning and building code and compliance. And believe it or not, most of 2019 was spent going through that red tape and bureaucracy, and it took the best part of 8 months to get that. But I was too determined to make sure that we could start helping people, to start providing a safe place to get people off the streets, and to give them a bed for the night, to give them food and beverages, to offer them services such as mobile doctor and nurses, laundry services, haircuts if you've got hair, unlike me, new clothing, and lots of other services that restore dignity, respect, self-esteem, and confidence. So this had never been done anywhere in the world before, in terms of taking such a space like car parks and changing its use at night into overnight accommodation for those people that are homeless. So for those watching, and I'm very conscious that I'm giving the very high level version of this, given the time constraints, we ran a world's first pilot here in Australia in October, end of September into October 2019. And we had 41 guests come through during that 2-week trial, 77% male, 23% female. We asked our guests to rate the quality of the beds and the quality of the sleep between 1 and 5, 5 being really good, 1 not being so good. We averaged 4.5 out of 5 for both. I wanted to get that 5 out of 5, but you can always do better. And I'd never set any expectations in terms of outcomes for the pilot. I was just in my heart, I knew it was the right thing to do, and we'd been through all this red tape and bureaucracy. I just wanted to get operational. And within the first few days, it became all worthwhile when one of our guests came up to us with probably one of the most profound statements that we heard during that pilot, which was, he came up to us and he said, "It's the first time I've had a dream in years." Now, when I heard that, I had to take myself off into a corner, because I started to cry, and I cried quite a lot when I heard that, because it was so left field. But when I pulled myself together and reflected on that, I thought, well, yeah, this is a person, and it's the same for most people that are sleeping rough. They don't actually get into such a deep sleep to start experiencing dreams, because they're sleeping with the proverbial one eye open, either in fear of being attacked or having their belongings taken or being moved on. So to hear that was such a great feeling. And another one of our guests, a female guest, as she was able to get a good night's sleep in a safe place, she managed to get a job during the day, and she would come up to us with the biggest smile on her face and say, "Can you wake me up at 4:30 in the morning so I can start to get ready to go to work?" And there was many more anecdotes such as that. It was a truly amazing, incredible experience, not only just for me, but for our volunteers. We came off the back of the 2-week pilot, had never been done anywhere before in the world. We had some great media attention on the back of it. It took us actually global in terms of the media attention, in terms of articles being written about Bed Down globally, over in France, in Germany, in Hungary, US, China, Pakistan, the list goes on. And I guess here in Australia, you know, we have some, unfortunately, we have to go through a lot of natural disasters. And just after the pilot finished, we thought we're gonna go into a great fundraising strategy and effort. But unfortunately, we had some raging bushfires over here. Then we had droughts and floods, and then that led into the pandemic. So most of last year was super challenging for Bed Down. But on the back of that, now we're just getting ready to relaunch and reactivate our Brisbane venue. That's why, unfortunately, we're pre-recording this interview, Nadia, rather than me being live there with the other great organisations that are going to be with you. And it would have been great to meet everyone on the day, but we're just getting ready now to help provide safety and shelter for our homeless here in Brisbane again in March. And, you know, the Bed Down platform is really about changing people's lives and saving people's lives. And maybe I'll stop just there so you can ask any questions as a result of that, because I can talk forever about Bed Down, trust me, but I'm very conscious of the time. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have, Nadia. But that gives you a brief overview about what we're doing.
Well, I would just like to know if anybody wants to get involved, if anybody you know, wants to find you, where can we get you? And also, what do you dream for the future? What would you like to see in our future? Right.
Thank you for that, Nadia. I suppose for the first question is, how do people contact me? Well, directly through email is, I'm not sure if you're putting any links for any of this, Nadia, but it's very easy, norm@beddown.org.au. We're across social media platforms on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for Bed Down, BEDDOWN. And in terms of what do I wish for the future? So Bed Down is being built on 3 core foundations. Hopefully this will answer the question. If it doesn't, I'm happy to expand that out. 3 core foundations. The first core foundation is the logical one, which is we believe everyone deserves a bed to sleep in at night, and providing that safety and shelter first and foremost, and a place for our guests to sleep, is the first core foundation. The second core foundation is probably the most important one, but I'll go through it very quickly for you and those people that are watching. It's about repairing the quality of life before building a life of quality for our guests. So for me, you know, wrapped around the premise of providing safety, security, shelter, and a good night's sleep for our guests, we wrap around complementary services, and we collaborate and partner with amazing other charitable organizations and service providers. So Orange Sky, who will be on there live, we're collaborating with those 2 amazing humans. Also, we bring in doctors and nurses and dentists and social workers, food and beverages, and that looks to restore dignity, respect, self-esteem, and confidence back to our guests. Now, what the building a life of quality is all about
Nadia, I think you need to take it. Looks like Norm got frozen.
Uh-huh. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we were just at the end there. He was just getting to the very end. He talks about the fact that since COVID, there's been a lot of empty shops, and that they've begun to think about the fact that maybe these empty shops, retail areas could be somehow used for homeless people as well, even potentially, transferred, changed into housing. So that's what he says at the very end. So now normally we would be going to Lucas and Nick. Are they here? I don't know if Nick, it looks like Lucas, Marchesi and Nick Patchett are not here. Could be a problem to do with connection because it's the middle of the night in Australia where they are. And occasionally they actually work where they're out of range. So shall I go ahead and tell you a little bit about Orange Sky Laundry?
Please.
Okay. So I came across Orange Sky Laundry a few years ago. These are two young men. They had this brilliant idea of putting two washing machines in the back of a van so that they could go and wash clothes for homeless people. So the first two washing machines that they were given by charity, I think there's some story like they managed to explode them. So anyway, they had to get two other washing machines, and they started out, they drive around and they have like the van, and then they have 6 seats. And homeless people come, anybody, and they can have their washing done. They can have showers now. They've even got showers. And then there's 6 volunteers, or 3 volunteers, should I say, and 3 guests. And basically, while they're washing their clothes, they have a chat with them. The volunteers come and they talk to the homeless people. So of course, this, I think the voluntary work can be done 2 hours a day. So people come for 2 hours a day. They're washing, they're doing the washing. They're allowing the homeless people to go in the shower, and they're talking to them. They're having proper conversations, social contact. Making friends. So anyway, this idea was so great. It spread like mycelium. It's gone all over Australia, and now it's in New Zealand as well. So it's just a really fabulous project. At the time, I actually wrote to them to ask if there was anything like this in France, and at that time there wasn't. But there's lots of ways that people can get involved. Obviously, if you're in Australia, you can volunteer, and you can give donations. I actually bought one of their T-shirts as a present for my husband, an Orange Sky Laundry T-shirt. But these are just really great people, really motivated. And like I said, it's already in New Zealand now. So, really great projects. So that's everybody. Thank you very much to all the participants. And I think now we can move to questions.
Well, thank you, Nadia, for putting this together. And thank you, Dunya and Katie. I'm wondering, Dunya and Katie, if you could put your videos on, and if Rick can put us in gallery view, we can have a conversation. I've been monitoring the chat box, and I think the first question that I would like to ask is, as you experience homelessness or people in need, how would you describe the demographic? What kinds of people are showing up for your food, Katie, or there in France, Dunya? What kinds of people? Are they mentally ill people? Are they just destitute people? Are they children? How would you describe the kinds of people that you're serving?
I can start. So the people that I help with Katie's Crops, as I said earlier, are very near and dear to my heart. They are like a second family to me. And I've gotten to know these people very well, and I've gotten to know their stories. And honestly, there's a wide demographic of people that come through. We have senior citizens come through who are just struggling and they might be too old to work now or are battling serious health conditions. We have people that have health conditions and they're now having to battle between paying their medical bills, putting a roof over their head, paying for their meals. We have people whose homes have just burned down, or they have lost their jobs and they're unable to pay for their rent and pay for their meals. So I think it's a very wide variety of people that come through. They are just the most incredible people that have fallen down on hard times. And I think what I've learned is there are a lot of stereotypes for people that are struggling with hunger, food insecurity, and homelessness. And it hurts me when people think that everyone who's struggling are just bad people, that they put themselves in these situations, because all of the people that I've met are just the most amazing people who are really just struggling. And a lot of times it's circumstances out of their control, but they are working so very hard to get back up on their feet, to be able to provide for themselves, for their families, and for others. So I've come to see so many different circumstances of people, and it's just such a wide variety. And I think what I've noticed is just how hardworking these people are. And a lot of them are so positive and upbeat despite the situations that they're facing. And they're always so kind to me, so kind to the other volunteers working, and so gracious and so thankful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Katie. Dunya, and maybe Nadia, you could translate, just wanting to know how, as you develop this program, what kinds of people are showing up at your refrigerators?
Just before I translate for Dunya, Norman of Beddown, and we actually had a very long conversation. And I asked him that question. I said to him, that there's a stereotype that these are drug addicts, and, we're not going to give them money because they'll go and buy alcohol or they'll go and buy drugs, which, everybody has their own opinion on that, he actually said to me that most of the people or a lot of people that come to Beddown, or people that that he's thinking about, were not actually drug addicts necessarily before, but that kind of life, can push people to alcohol if you're sleeping out in the street.
Ouais.
That's what he told me. So anyway,
Okay.
Dunya, tu as compris la question? Il demande.
Question, bien sûr. Mais comme je le disais tout à l'heure, du coup, les personnes qui osent venir, enfin, du moins qui viennent se servir dans les frigos, sont des étudiants, des familles nombreuses, des retraités, des réfugiés, des sans-abri, toutes les personnes qui sont dans une phase de précarité. Et en fait, l'avantage de ce système, c'est que les gens le font dans la dignité et dans la discrétion.
Uh-huh.
Et ils n'ont pas besoin de justifier de leurs revenus auprès d'une association. Donc, c'est un peu la beauté de ce projet.
Mm-hmm. So she said the same as what she said before, is that there's students, there's old people, there's homeless people, there's families, refugees, immigrants, and she said that the beauty of this project is the fact that it can be done in that they don't have to justify themselves to anybody for the need that they have. They don't have to explain why it is that they need food at this time, so they can do it with dignity, with respect. So that's what she said.
Dans la discrétion, oui.
Yeah, with discretion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Nadia.
Je voulais juste demander, est-ce que tu as vu un changement dans le type de gens qui viennent? I'm asking her if there's a change in the type of people that are coming. Par exemple, est-ce qu'avant COVID, il y avait moins de familles, et là, il y a beaucoup de familles, par exemple? I'm asking her if before there was no families, and now due to COVID, is there a lot more families,
Plus de familles, c'est évident, et surtout plus de personnes qui sont d'apparence comme toi et moi, mais qui ont perdu leur travail à cause de la crise Covid, qui sont intermittents du spectacle, qui bossent dans la restauration, des étudiants qui bossaient en parallèle, mais qui n'ont plus de travail à côté. Donc, qui sont dans des phases de vie très compliquées et qui n'arrivent pas à joindre les deux bouts à la fin du mois, et qui ont besoin, en fait, de passer par ce dispositif pour se nourrir. En fait, c'est vraiment le meilleur moyen de... Si tu veux, tu as des associations comme les Restos du Cœur, Secours Populaire, mais tu vas devoir justifier de tes revenus. Mais parfois, c'est juste une phase de quelques mois. C'est ce que prouve la crise Covid. C'est ce que j'espère, en tout cas. Quand ça reprendra, les gens pourront récupérer un travail, reprendre leur vie presque normale. Mais là, c'est une phase, c'est une période de vie, du moins, qui est très compliquée à vivre pour beaucoup de personnes. Donc, c'est une transition.
Oui, so she's saying it's like a transition period. This is a period where there's students who used to work, in restaurants. There's people that worked in restaurants or in theatres, or just families. She's saying not necessarily even homeless people, just normal people that have fallen on hard times. They can't make ends meet at the end of the month, and she's hoping that this is a stage, and that when COVID eventually finishes, that these people will be able to get jobs again, but at the moment they're in difficulty. So, but as she told us before, there's also a great increase in people helping. There's a lot more compassion, a lot more cooperation as well.
Complètement.
Merci.
Merci, Nadia.
Yeah, that would make sense in some ways that, one of the consequences of the pandemic has been that it's put all of us under duress, particularly the elderly, but also the marginalized, the people with pre-existent complicated health conditions. All of us are subject to COVID. It hasn't spared any part of the world or any part of society. So I think it's naturally made people more empathetic with suffering. And actually that raises in my mind the next question I wanted to ask both of you. And that is, as the pandemic has unfolded, do you find that the city governments or the state governments are more responsive and helpful? Is there any possibility that the state would begin to subsidize your efforts, for example, or start to take refrigerators out to other cities in France? Or is this just remaining a very private kind of NGO endeavor that just is working on its own?
So what I have noticed during the pandemic, and since we have really ramped up our efforts because there has just been such an increased need and so many people that are really struggling that may have not struggled and wondered where their next meal is coming for before COVID and before this pandemic, is really just how supportive my community is, how supportive people are across the United States and across the world of what I'm doing with Katie's Crops to help support those in need, and really just efforts all across the world. I've really seen people saying we need to step up and we need to support one another, and that's been so heartwarming to see, is just how many people are saying we need to step up and we need to do something and are supporting causes like mine across the world. And that has been something that has been extremely helpful to us, because with everything that we did, serving over 18,000 meals last year, that is not something that we had budgeted for. That is not something that we had planned for, but we saw the need and we were like, we need to step up. We need to do something. People are struggling. And we were able to make it happen with people just stepping up and saying, how can we help? What can we do to support you? Which was just absolutely incredible and just led to a very successful year for us. And we were able to help so many more people than we could have ever imagined and really help to meet the need. But in terms of that, we really just received incredible support from just all sorts of individuals. And that was where the main source of our support came from. When we were going through lockdowns, our city government did deem us an essential business. So we were still able to host our meal distributions, make sure that everybody was still getting meals, which was very incredibly helpful. And just overall, our whole community has stepped forward to support us. And I think they are really the reason why we were able to do what we did last year and are able to continue doing it this year. And we are just very grateful for their support.
Beautiful, thank you. Dunya, what kind of support are you getting in Perez there.
Nadia, tu peux traduire, pardon, excuse-moi.
Il demande est-ce que le gouvernement t'aide, est-ce qu'il y a des projets de gouvernement qui t'aident financièrement?
En fait, nous c'est un peu différent. On a des soutiens des mairies, donc des municipalités. Il y a des budgets qui sont alloués pour financer des projets et des initiatives citoyennes, comme la nôtre.
So she's saying that they've got help from the local mayor's office, les mairies locales et aussi des associations OGN, non gouvernementales.
Non, pas d'ONG particulière. Non, vraiment les municipalités.
Yeah, so it's mostly in the mayor's offices, the local mayors. You know, in France they have mayors in every single city, in every single town. So they're getting, that means help from a local level, local government level, but not from national government. And for the moment, not from non-government organizations either.
Et par contre, l'État, effectivement, avec la crise, donc propose des budgets et donc propose des appels à projets. Donc il y a des enveloppes budgétaires qui sont allouées pour aider les associations à se développer et à lutter un peu contre les différents problèmes que la crise a fait émerger. Donc,
et tu peux faire une application pour ça si tu veux.
Comment? Enfin, tu peux postuler à un budget. Par exemple, là, l'État a alloué une enveloppe de 100 millions d'euros.
Okay, so she says that there is actually a state budget, and organizations can apply for some money from the state budget for projects, during the time of COVID, such as her project.
Je pense qu'ils attendent énormément des gens et des associations locales ou nationales pour permettre de lutter contre les différents problèmes qui ont existé et qui continuent de perdurer avec cette crise.
So the state, she says that the state is counting a lot on the associations. In France, a lot of things are done by these associations. So the state is assuming that the public are going to actually, launch their own projects from a grassroots level. So, et vous avez dit 100 000 euros.
Là, c'est un budget qui est de 100 millions d'euros pour différentes associations, donc répartis sur différents secteurs, la lutte contre le gaspillage alimentaire, l'hébergement.
So the money is going to food security, but also to things to do with housing.
Différents points sur lesquels des associations peuvent contribuer en fait à lutter contre ces problèmes.
So if you've got a project that fights, against homelessness or for food waste, then you can apply for these budgets.
Good. Well, it's good to hear that the state instruments are being supportive to both of you as you try to deal with these very critical issues. And that raises, I think, a broader question in my mind, and that is about your analysis of why there is so much homelessness and how we can remedy it. There's been all kinds of studies indicating that the more there is a wealth disparity in a country, the greater the gap between the rich and the poor, the more homelessness you have, and the more mental illness you have, the more incarceration in prisons that you have, the more disease that you have. And it's not surprising, therefore, that two of the top homelessness cities in the world are Los Angeles and New York City, because of the wide wealth disparity in the United States. India, massive disparity between the rich and the poor there. Similarly, in the Philippines, you have in the United States, for example, really homelessness began in the 1970s when Ronald Reagan in California stripped away any state government support for mental illness And rather than dealing with the problem, they just let the mentally ill people out into the streets. And that was the genesis of the homelessness crisis in the state of California. And we've had, Republican governments in many of the state houses across the country that have slashed social welfare benefits, slashed education, slashed any kind of support for those that are in need. And then, not surprisingly, many of them end up in the streets with mental issues, with physical issues, and are unable to get jobs. So it's a systemic problem that is arising, in my understanding of it, from an infrastructure design failure on the part of our countries. And that's why, countries like Finland and Scandinavia, where they've specifically focused on homelessness by remedying the infrastructures that can support vulnerable people, they have the fewest numbers of homeless people. So anyway, I just wondered, since you're close to the ground and really interfacing on a daily basis with them, what would be your analysis for what's causing homelessness, and what we can do to solve it from an institutional public policy point of view?
I think, as I said earlier, kind of talking about the people that I help and kind of hearing their stories and hear how they have fallen down on hard times, is a lot of it was purely circumstantial and things that were not necessarily in their control with sometimes they have their health problems or losing their job and things like that. So those are a lot of the reasons why I've seen people that have come to fall down on hard times. In South Carolina, we don't necessarily have as big of cities and things like that as California and New York and those places. So I can't speak for there. We do not have as large of a homeless population here as those places do, but we also have, at least in my community, a lot of amazing resources for people that are struggling. We have a men's and a women's shelter that have recently opened up in our community, which was amazing. And a lot of the churches and places in my area have been offering support to people. So I think just the grassroots support from my community has been very helpful. And a lot of these shelters are really focused on getting people back up on their feet when they've fallen down on hard times, getting them back out into the world, helping to find them jobs and things like that, which has been so amazing. I think one of the things that I have seen, though, that has caused a large issue is gentrification and trying to put in kind of like these new nice apartment buildings or things like that, and kind of taking down places where low-income people had been living. And it's always heartbreaking to see that and to see people losing their homes to that. But as for the small town of Somerville, I think that we do have a lot of amazing grassroots efforts, and that's kind of what I think is part of the solution, is just communities coming together and recognizing that, yes, there may be a problem and they want to come together and do something to be a part of the solution, and saying, what can I do to help? And that might just be being kind to one another, donating any extra jackets that you may have during the winter when it's colder, blankets, socks, things like that, extra toiletries and supplies, extra produce that you may have, or extra food that you may have in your house that you're not going to eat, and donating those to help people, and just really being supportive and there for those that are struggling and helping to get them back up onto their feet. I think that has been something that my community has done and that has really helped out, is just having so many people that are there and so supportive of it, and trying to really help get people back up on their feet as quickly as possible, and being understanding that there are so many different circumstances that cause people to fall onto hard times, to struggle with food insecurity, to struggle with hunger, and to become homeless. There's one family that we have known for the past 10 years and have been helping them. We first met them when they were living in a homeless shelter, and we watched them go in and out of homelessness. It was a mother and her 2 kids, and the mother was working 3 jobs to make ends meet. They were finally able to move out of the shelter, which was amazing. Found a place. We were supporting them by bringing them vegetables over, and they were doing great. And then the mother's health took a turn, and she started to battle kidney disease. And she was waiting on dialysis, waiting for a kidney for 7 years. And finally, last July, she got one, which was so very exciting. And it was amazing to see her finally get back up onto her feet and start to feel better. But there was a very long time where she was unable to work because she just was so sick. And so her son, from such a young age, was having to ride his bike, work 2 jobs to kind of help make ends meet because his mom just was so sick and unable to work. And she was just the most amazing lady. And it was so heartbreaking to see her struggling with this and see her family struggling with this. And it was something that was really ultimately out of her control. So I think just being small grassroots efforts and people just coming together and saying, I recognize that this is an issue. What can I do to help? And even though some people may think, oh, I'm just one person, how big of a difference can I really make? You can change someone's life with one small action. It doesn't matter how young or old you are. You can make an incredible impact by just doing one small thing. And I think if everybody remembers that and all working together, then we can definitely be a part of the solution.
Beautifully put, Katie. Thank you. Beautifully put. Dunya.
Dunya, tu as compris la question?
Non.
Et demande à ton avis, quelles sont les solutions? Est-ce qu'au niveau gouvernemental ou même au niveau pas forcément gouvernemental, qu'est-ce que tu crois que c'est les solutions pour les gens qui sont en précarité, les gens qui
Je
sont
pense que c'est un peu comme ce que disait Katie, c'est en faisant juste à son échelle, en faisant des petites choses qu'on peut faire finalement de grandes choses. On met chacun sa pierre à l'édifice et on permet de contribuer à une entraide locale, en créant du lien social, en aidant les plus démunis et en se concentrant sur l'humain principalement surtout.
So she's saying just in agreement with Katie, just to be able to do what you can at your level and to be able to contribute where you can and to see the humanity, to see in people. And if you can, if you can, whatever way you can participate, a small way or a large way, you're bringing your drop of water to put out the fire, as I say,
Oui.
Et au niveau gouvernemental, qu'est-ce que tu crois qui pourrait, tu as une idée, qu'est-ce que pourrait aider?
Au niveau gouvernemental,
je pense soutenir toutes ces associations qui, parce qu'en fait, s'aperçoit que c'est les citoyens qui ont les meilleures idées.
C'est ce qu'ils font déjà. En fait, c'est ce qu'ils font déjà, c'est soutenir les associations qui sont sur place, sur le terrain, qui connaissent les problématiques locales. C'est ce qu'ils font déjà. En fait, ils soutiennent en donnant des budgets, en allouant des budgets pour des associations, pour que vraiment chaque association gère son territoire et réponde aux problématiques locales.
Okay.
Donc, peut-être allouer plus de budget, peut-être se concentrer sur des problématiques bien précises dans chaque ville, quartier. Je pense que c'est très difficile de demander au gouvernement de proposer des lois nationales parce que en fait, le problème, il n'est pas là. Si on veut résoudre les difficultés sur le territoire, il faut se concentrer sur du local et répondre à des problématiques locales pour que derrière, en fait, il y ait effectivement que ces problématiques soient résolues plus facilement, en fait.
So she's saying that the government can help in the way that they're already doing in terms of they support the associations, and the associations are the ones that know what's going on locally and what is needed locally. So she said that, for example, if they wanted, they could give more budget to the associations, but it's already being done from a grassroots level. So from a national level, she's saying it's not so easy for them to know what to do, the government, because they're not actually living in those areas. So she says it's the associations. If they help the associations know what's needed.
Good, thank you. Thank you both. This has been a splendid session. Nadia, do you want to make a closing summarizing statement?
Well, I would just like to say, I remember at the very beginning of Humanity Rising, you had people from the HeartMath Institute on, and that was a really important session. I came across the HeartMath Institute a few years ago through a series of synchronicities. And it's the fact that, now we know that how you feel and how you behave affects everybody around you. So to me, if we make the effort to help the people that are suffering the most in this world, it doesn't take a lot to help a homeless person. You can, at the moment I walk out of the supermarket and my son gives bananas to the homeless people. He just gives them some fruit, and we chat, I'll say, how are you? I recognize them as human, I'm not going to judge them, for what kind of life that they have. So I think the idea of heart coherence is really important, because if we can help immigrants, people in need, it's the title, Spreading a Smile on the Streets. We're lifting their heart coherence, which in turn affects our heart coherence, which means that there's more people lifted. I think these projects are so easy to get involved with. If you live in Australia, if you live in Melbourne, you can just go and give 2 hours, and you'll probably have your life changed, as Katie said, because when you're talking to homeless people, you're going to understand that there's not much difference between them and you. Anybody can have some kind of problem, anybody can have an illness, whether it be physical, mental, spiritual, any kind of illness. So I think, being able to help these people, it makes us feel really good. You would go home at night knowing that you'd done something really good. So I just want to say thank you again to Humanity Rising, and thank you so much to everybody. Merci, Dunya. Thank you, Katie.
Yes, thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Katie, and merci beaucoup,
Merci.
Dunya. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
This has been a wonderful session. And I think, Nadia, the point that you were making, and Katie and Dunya as well, is all of us suffer duress. And sometimes people stumble, but that doesn't lessen their humanity. It doesn't lessen their dignity. It doesn't lessen their essential nobility. And oftentimes we pass the homeless on the street, and there's something that we want to just push away, in part because we know that were it not for the grace of God, there go us as well. All of us have had the experience of seeing the homeless. All of us have had the experience of having to make a choice. Do you give them money? Do you just ignore them? Do you just pretend that you're too busy? And as you remember, the great parable in the Gospels of the Good Samaritan, of a man who was wounded, and it was the rabbis and the religious leaders who hurried by because they were too busy to care for the injured, destitute man on the side of the road. And then came a Samaritan, not even a Jew, someone who was a foreigner in those parts, who had every reason to ignore the destitute man. And it was him that paused and bound up the wounds and cared for the man. And it is the Good Samaritan, said Jesus, that will be remembered long in the realms of heaven and blessed eternally for that good deed. So let us remember that as we consider our homeless all over the world, in a neighborhood near us. They require our attention. And I want to salute you three women today for everything that you've been doing. You are in the spirit of Mother Teresa. I remember Mother Teresa. I met Mother Teresa, by the way, when I was just a young boy, 15 years old. My parents took us to India, and we heard about this nun that was doing extraordinary work. So we went out to visit her, and going on the way through the teeming city of Calcutta, homeless, destitute, dying, and diseased people were all around. I remember clearly stepping over the dead bodies of a couple of people just getting down the street. And Mother Teresa would go out every day and gather the little babies that had been discarded and clean them up and bathe them and feed them and nurture them. And it was one of the most moving experiences of my entire life. As a young boy, not very conscious of suffering or poverty, being immersed in the contradictions of Calcutta, and in watching a young woman, a good Samaritan, she wasn't Indian, she'd come from Yugoslavia, care for those little babies. And as you all know, she drew the attention of the entire world, received the Nobel Peace Prize, and was honored far and wide for her tender, loving care for the vulnerable. In the end, that's the anvil upon which love is forged. It's easy to say, I love you. It's a different order of love to reach out your hand to those who have fallen and pick them up and put a smile on their face. And the three of you have done that. I want to honor you and salute you and thank you for your service to humanity during this time of such vulnerability for us all. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. And then tomorrow, everyone, we're going to continue this discussion, but in a very different way. We're going to have a discussion about intellectual shamans. You know, you think of shamans oftentimes as indigenous people, medicine people, elders who interface between nature and society. The shaman traditionally is that person in the tribe that can speak both the language of nature and the language of humanity. And they mediate back and forth. They're healers. Well, we're going to gather together some intellectuals and academics who have been healing through their words. And we're going to have a woman, Sandra Waddick, who teaches management at Boston College, who's been an intellectual shaman, seeking through the power of the mind, the power of words to bring healing and reconciliation and forgiveness. So that'll be our topic tomorrow on Humanity Rising. So thank you, everyone. Beautiful session today. Dunya, Katie, Nadia, thank you so much. And we'll see you all again here tomorrow on Humanity Rising for a session on intellectual shamans. Bye, everyone.